I had always liked The Fall of the House of Usher. I had read it as a schoolboy in class and persuaded my parents to give me for Christmas the collected works of Edgar Allan Poe. And the one story I had always remembered was The Fall of the House of Usher. And what had happened, I'd been doing a series of low-budget black and white films for AIP, each shot on a 10-day schedule. And they wanted me to do 2 more, and I convinced them, instead of doing 2 10-day black and white pictures, that I would do 1 15-day color picture, and The Fall of the House of Usher was the one I chose to do.
My great-grandfather. His wife. My grandfather.
I never really started off to do a series of films on Edgar Allan Poe. I simply wanted to do The Fall of the House of Usher.
What have you done?
When it was successful and AIP asked me to do another one, I chose The Pit and the Pendulum. It became a series. They were quite successful. What I generally did was to take the story as written by Poe, use that as the 3rd act or climax of my film, and then try to write or invent a 1st and 2nd act that would lead logically to what Poe had written and hopefully stay within the style and the spirit of Poe. The premature burial started off to be for another company other than American International. I was surprised to find on the first day of shooting, Jim Nicholson and Sam Arkoff, the partners who owned and ran American International, appear on the set with a bottle of champagne and big handshakes welcoming me back into the company. They had bought the rights the day before I started shooting from Pathé, and the film ended up being done for AIP. The reason Ray Milland played the lead was primarily because Vincent Price was under contract to AIP and I couldn't use Vincent.
Guy, darling. Please wake up. They've all gone now.
Yes, Emily.
Are you feeling better?
I think so.
What's the matter, Guy? What happened to you down there?
I can't remember exactly.
This is the beat of a human heart. You are experiencing the heartbeat of a dying man. And it is with death and dying that we concern ourselves.
I began to believe that I was starting to repeat myself, so I tried to vary what was becoming a formula, and the first way in which I varied that formula was to take 3 of the Poe stories and shoot a 3-part picture. The Poe stories, many of them were so short that they really couldn't go the distance. They had to be stretched out or rewritten to make a 90-minute film. By making 3 30-minute films, I could stay closer to the original stories. I myself began to be a little bit tired of what I was doing, and one of the first things I began to do was to bring more humor into them, and the story of the Black Cat in Tales of Terror was the first attempt to make one in which we had more humor than horror.
Bordeaux, Cabernet, Chateau Margaux, vintage 1837. A bit heavy for a Margaux.
Correct!
Chateau Petit Village, 1828. It's very good.
Correct. However, I feel I must comment on your most unorthodox method of tasting.
Huh?
Well, the accredited procedure is, of course, to partake of a small mouthful like this, whoosh it around in the mouth like that, and then inhale like this, thus releasing the aroma.
You do it your way and I do it my way, huh?
The Tales of Terror had been successful, and people had commented particularly upon the comedy section of it, The Black Cat. So in the next film, which was The Raven, we would turn the entire film more in the direction of comedy. At the same time, we wanted to make the films bigger, and we accomplished that in a couple of ways. One, by simply going for bigger sets, more elaborate special effects, and so forth. And the second way was by bringing in more names, particularly Peter Lorre and Boris Karloff, around Vincent Price.
Forgive me, Pop.
What did he say?
He told me to beware.
Of what?
I don't know.
The Poe films had been quite successful in Europe, where they'd been both critically successful and commercially successful. And AIP's partners, a company called Anglo Amalgamated in England, suggested that I do the next one in England. And I jumped at the chance. First, I thought it would be very nice to live and work in England for a while. And also, I knew that I was going to have the opportunity to work with a slightly bigger budget. I had been shooting all of the American pictures on 3-week schedules, and I'd been promised a 5-week schedule in England. Plus the fact that, again, we were able to take sets from some very big pictures out of the scene docks. I think we used Beckett, A Man for All Seasons, and similar pictures. We were able to take their sets, or at least the units of their sets, and get ourselves another increase in the look of our films.
But let us not dwell on terror. The knowledge of terror is vouchsafed only to the precious few.
general, I'm opposed to censorship in all forms. I would reluctantly support a rating system such as the American system, which doesn't censor the films but gives some indication to the audiences as to the degree of sex or violence or whatever. I like much of the work that's being done in the horror genre today, particularly in the area of special effects. The newer techniques are clearly better than what we were working with in the 60s. On the other hand, I'm not particularly in favor of the greater amount of, what should I say, blood and gore that's flowing across the screen. It starts with one person saying, "I'll cut off a wrist and the blood will shoot across the screen." The next director says, "Well, I'll cut him off at the elbow." The next guy is cutting him off at the shoulder, and the screen is becoming very red and I think a little bit disgusting. I would rather have the film show a little bit of overt violence and horror and go back slightly to doing it in a more subjective fashion. I don't think the elements that scare an audience have changed very much over the last few years. I think these deep-seated fears that the filmmaker or the writer is trying to attack are buried in the unconscious mind. They come from childhood, and we're trying to recreate these childhood fears. The little baby alone in his crib or bed in a room at night. Possibly it's a dark, stormy night with lightning and thunder. The parents come in and reassure that little child that there's nothing to be afraid of. The child knows very well there's plenty to be afraid of. There's something out there he doesn't know, and it's frightening. And I think what the filmmaker does now or in the past or in the future is to break through the defenses of the conscious mind and to attack and expose those fears of the unconscious mind. If you do it right, the audience will scream.